Brian Gutekunst said the Green Bay Packers want their nickel and their safety to be essentially interchangeable. So how does that change the way that they look to fill that position? Plus, Preston Smith is so back.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. The hits just keep on coming from Brian Gutekunst. He offered really a lot of nice information. Ted Thompson was loath to offer us anything in these press availabilities that he used to have. In fact, it got to the point at the end of his career where he was only sitting down once a year with Bob McGinn. Now, it's possible some of that had to do with his health and those kinds of things. We don't have to get into that part of this. But one of the things that is clear from the conversations that we've been able to have with Brian Gutekunst, with Matt LaFleur, with Jeff Hafley, is that this safety position, if you're going to play the kind of defense that the Packers seemingly want to play, a defense that is going to have a lot of cover three elements to it, you have to be able to disguise what you're doing. One of the big problems with the Joe Barry defense is there was not enough disguise, not enough pre-snap deception with what was coming. And it's not just, okay, it's going to be cover three. Because think about it this way. If you've got someone over the slot, okay, 11 personnel. So picture 3 receivers on the field. You've got a corner over the slot receiver, and you've got a 2 high shell look. And you are pretty sure that they're going to get to cover 3. Okay? Now, let's say that the safety to the slot receiver side, so the 2 receiver side, that safety all of a sudden comes down and essentially acts as your slot defender. And the slot defender goes to where that safety might otherwise go in cover 3. It's not a huge difference in terms of where they are on the field. It's really not. But that rotation affects the timing of the offensive play. And so, okay, you see the 2 high shell as a quarterback, you know, okay, I think they're going to get to a 1 high look. But you see the defender over there across from your slot receiver, and you go, okay, I know where he's going to be in this cover 3 look. And all of a sudden, he is flopping with that safety, and it's a different look than you expected. That can just make you for a split second go, wait, did I read this coverage wrong? Did I see this wrong? And it affects the way the spacing is on the field. So when a quarterback drops back and they anticipate players being in a certain place, the way that their brains work is really remarkable. Their ability to navigate spatially on the field and understand, okay, I know with this concept, these receivers are going to be here, and if the defenders are here, I know where my window is. But if all of a sudden 2 defenders that you think are going to go to a certain place from a certain place, if that changes, all of a sudden the picture changes. And some quarterbacks, that can short circuit them, or at least not short circuit them, but cause them to pause a split second longer than they need to given that they kind of know what coverage is coming. And then all of a sudden, that's the extra split second that Rashawn Gary or Preston Smith or Kenny Clark or Devontae Wyatt or Carl Brooks or Lucas Van Ness or Kingsley Enagbare whenever he comes back or Kobe Wooden need to come get you. And that's kind of an essential part of this defense. There's also, linebacker walked up in the A gap. Is he coming or is he not? Okay, I think he's coming. Now we got to change the protection. Now he drops out. And we have this safety spin coming in a way that I didn't anticipate. And that becomes kind of problematic if you're a quarterback. That's going to make you second guess what your brain is expecting to see. Even though the coverage turns out to be the same as you were expecting. When you see bodies moving in directions that you did not anticipate, that makes you go, wait, what is happening here? Just for that. I mean, this is how fast the game is played. Like the difference between 2.5 seconds and 2.8 or 3 seconds is huge. That could be the whole play. You might have missed your opportunity in 0.5 seconds. That's how fast this stuff goes. Now, that has an impact on how you scout safeties and how you scout the nickel position. It is all the more reason for me to go Keyshawn Nixon as the slot actually continues to make sense because I want plays where he's the safety. I want plays where he starts as the safety and then becomes the nickel. I like that. But that means you need safeties that can run and cover. That means you need safeties that can start in one place and end up in another, that have the athleticism, the movement skills to do that. To disguise and recover. To show, okay, this is a single high look, and then all of a sudden you got to bust your ass back and you got to get into a quarters look. And there's a game up front and you've got a double mug look. And like there's so many different ways you can present additional information. So for the Packers, you look at the corners that they might want to draft. Well, how about a corner that can play safety? Well, if that's going to be the case, tackling becomes all the more important. You have to be able to tackle if you're in the nickel, because if you're going to be in the nickel, there are going to be some plays where you're actually going to wind up as the single high safety. Not that much, but it'll happen. Or the deep half safety. Or the quarter safety. Because of the way the disguise is going to look, because of guys moving and changing and operating across this scheme. That presents challenges because it puts more pressure on your defensive backs. This is a scheme that relies on the front four to win consistently. And the Packers have the front to do that. But then all the cool stuff, all the interesting stuff is happening with your back seven. So that means you've got to have these interchangeable pieces. Think about Jimmy Ward, the ultimate in interchangeable pieces. Someone who has played all over that 49ers defense in the slot. Deep safety, deep half, deep middle. He can move anywhere. Talanoa Hufanga. He's not really a slot player. But if he's coming from the deep half, his speed to come down and make plays downhill, not just in the run game, but in coverage, that provides such a crucial element to that defense when it is at its best. And so if you want those three guys to be interchangeable, then you need safeties that can cover. So that becomes an essential part of the evaluation. It's not just, can you play in the post? Can you play from deep half, deep middle in coverage? No, you have to be able to play man coverage against receivers. You have to have the movement skills to do that. That is a small list. I think it makes someone like Xavier McKinney in New York even more appealing. Someone who can play that underneath coverage in his own is solid. If you're asking him to be a man cover player, he's not the most elite athlete. but it's just a solid all-around player who can do almost anything you ask of him in a scheme. In New York, disguise, man coverage, blitzes, all the stuff that we're going to see, I think, from Jeff Hafley at times. This is going to change the profile of the kinds of players that the Packers look for, not from an athletic standpoint, because you still need all of that athleticism. But it means you're going to need more man coverage ability from your safeties. It means you're going to need more zone coverage ability from your nickel, tackling from your nickel. So if you can't do all of those things, you just can't play in this defense. The linebackers are a crucial part of this defense, and we've talked about them. But here's the thing. They just need more. This front switch means they need more bodies. We're going to talk about it in just a second here on Locked On Packers. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at BetterHelp. A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. The other day I told you reading has been something that I've been trying to prioritize a little bit more. Yesterday morning, I made the time, and then my time was interrupted. And I did what I had to do in that moment, and I came back and I finished it because it was important to me. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. BetterHelp is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Linebacker continues to be something that we talk about with this defense because of the impact that the linebackers in New York, in Houston, in San Francisco make. And when Brian Gutekunst spoke, again, another Goody nugget, he said that they would love to have De'Vondre Campbell back. Now, maybe that's just GM speak. And we've talked on this show about the grades, the needs, those kinds of things. Maybe erroneously have been assuming that based on the amount of money the Packers can save from post-June 1 cutting De'Vondre Campbell, that would just be the path that they would go toward. But they saved some money restructuring Rashawn Gary. They saved some money with Preston Smith. We're going to talk about Preston at the end. This David Bakhtiari money, which we talked about yesterday, that's coming. And so they can free up plenty of space. I am becoming more and more convinced that the right move, whether it's the move the Packers make, I'm not sure, but the right move is to keep De'Vondre Campbell, but to just change that contract, to alter it, to extend it, to do whatever you have to do to say, look, he's the best linebacker on this team, and frankly, right now, it's not that close. There were times last year where he was not playing particularly well. Injuries are part of the deal, and I made the case that that's just the reality. And that you can't rely on De'Vondre Campbell to play at a high level. That's still true. Here's the problem. And the more I thought about it, the more I came to this conclusion. A team that is built to win now, and we have spent a lot of time this offseason already. I mean, it's not even barely March, not even leap year, all that stuff. Is the linebacker position is important in this defense, and this is a win-now team. This is a team ready to compete right now today that was mere moments away from an NFC Championship game that I would have probably picked them to win had they gotten there with Quay Walker and De'Vondre Campbell. And the more that I think about it, the more that I think, yes, they still need to add a young, potentially high draft pick linebacker. We talked about Edgerrin Cooper, Texas A&M, the linebacker, the movement skills, the athleticism, the length, the size. Not to replace De'Vondre Campbell, but to compete with Quay Walker, who has been pretty clearly the worst of those two linebackers over the last 2 years. And so it comes down to, what kind of contract can you get De'Vondre Campbell to agree to? Does he want to be in Green Bay? Remember, he did not like some of the conversations being had, whether it was in the room, whether it was online. We're not exactly sure what that's about. We don't have truth serum to ask. But he did not like being scapegoated last year, playing hurt, all those things. Now, you play hurt, you open yourself up to criticism, which is just the reality of the game. Because if you're out there, you're going to be scrutinized by the way you play. Now, Isaiah McDuffie is not an answer. If he's an answer, the question is wrong. Knowing the defense is not a big enough advantage for him. And so you look at the other linebackers, inside linebackers, off-ball linebackers. Eric Wilson's a free agent and not a guy that you want actually playing linebacker. And then Christian Welch, who's also a free agent, who's just like a practice squad backup player. You really only have 3 linebackers at a time where you are pretty consistently going to have 2 of them on the field. Like, it was different if you were going to live in a Mike Pettin world where you're playing in dime a lot and you're really just going to have 1 linebacker on the field. And so you're going to play 3 safeties and you don't really have to work 3 linebackers plus a practice squad guy or a special teams guy. That would probably be enough. Given that De'Vondre Campbell is probably not the long-term solution for you, that Quay Walker has done nothing to show that he is even an average starter in the league with any sort of consistency. Just isn't. Doesn't mean he can't be, just isn't right now. You have to add to this room. And I don't think you can add while also taking away from De'Vondre Campbell. That is the conclusion, at least for the moment, that I have reached. I reserve the right to change my mind. But I think the hope would be that you can get him to agree to lower the 2024 salary cap hit. Extend him, give an extra year, maybe add void years, though I don't think the Packers really want to do that. But you could add a year or 2 to the contract. Make sure that he feels like he's getting the money. Throw a little signing bonus in there. You can spread it out and then go from there. It's hard for me to believe that a team ready to win right now, even if I think Edgerrin Cooper is a really, really tantalizing prospect, and even if I think the athleticism for Quay Walker and the scheme that he's going to be playing in fits a lot of the things that I think he can do, that is a huge risk for a team ready to win. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying they can do both. If you can rework that contract, if you can get De'Vondre Campbell to agree to rework it, they just got Preston Smith to take a pay cut. We're going to talk about that. He doesn't have to necessarily take a pay cut. You just have to change the cap hit this year. You add a year. It becomes easier to do that. You spread some of that money out. You offer incentives, whatever you want to do. There's a million ways to structure this thing to make it work for both sides. I think because it seems obvious now that they're going to move on from David Bakhtiari and they've freed up this other money with Preston and Rashawn Gary. And there's a couple other mechanisms that they can still take. Extending Kenny Clark, et cetera, that I have come to the conclusion that keeping De'Vondre Campbell on a lower money deal is the move, and this is important, and you still need to add bodies. Maybe 2. I mean, I'm not opposed to a linebacker free agent and a draft pick. Now, they could do that. They could move on from De'Vondre Campbell post June 1, still sign someone, a Malik Harrison. I know Packer fans still want Devin White. I don't know why, but they do because it's a name they know. It's a name that made some plays against the Packers 3 years ago, I guess. I don't know. He has not been good the last 3 years. Add a free agent and a draft pick and then move on from De'Vondre Campbell. Like, I think that plan works too, but you're introducing more unknown. You're introducing more variables. So what is the risk versus reward there? If you're moving on from De'Vondre Campbell, what are you getting? What are you getting? Now, you could wait. You could wait and see who you can get. That's the beauty of it. You can wait until free agency. Hey, we really want Malik Harrison, maybe. Maybe. Knows Jeff Hafley's scheme, Ohio State, the background. We think Malik Harrison is the perfect guy here. But the market gets out of control. Well, if you're going to post June 1 De'Vondre Campbell anyway, then you don't have to do it right now. Because you don't get to count the savings until June 1 anyway. So you can keep him on the roster. Also, in the draft, maybe the cards don't fall the right way. Edgerrin Cooper doesn't fall to you. If you can't count the savings until June anyway, there's no urgency to make a decision right now. So I do think it makes sense to keep him. But I also think if you can get a free agent and then things break right for you in the draft, go nuts. Then you can move on. You can save the money and it can help you with, your draft class signings. It can help you, probably not at that point maybe, but it'll give you a little cushion. It can help you with the Jordan Love contract, which they can't sign until May anyway. So you have time here because of the only realistic mechanism, I think. And so that makes this an interesting question. Like, we may not know the answer until we get past the draft on De'Vondre Campbell, unless we get word that they've reworked the deal. And then we know the answer. He's staying. And I think that would make sense for the Packers. All right, speaking of reworking it to save money, Preston Smith is back. What does it mean for Green Bay? We talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 US American dollars if your bet wins. Guess what you can bet on? The NFL draft. And it's really funny because you can bet on Caleb Williams going #1. You want to get crazy? We've been hearing Jaden Daniels, maybe #1 QB on some boards. Get crazy. You can get crazy. You can bet on Bears fan misery. That's always fun. That's why it's funny. And there's also NBA. NBA is really fun to gamble on. Bet on all your favorite NBA players with team bets, quick bets, same game parlays, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA and official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The Packers created a little over $2 million, almost $2.5 million in cap space restructuring Preston Smith's contract. And it's not a restructure in the traditional sense. In fact, had they done a full restructure, just pushed money out, they could have saved like $10 million. They didn't, because they want Preston Smith back. And I didn't understand this idea from a lot of fans over the course of the season. Oh, he's washed. Oh, he's going to be gone. Oh, he's expensive. Like, he's a little expensive, but the value that he brings, and he's still only 31. The big games that he came up huge in for the Packers, he's still their most consistent run defender. And when you go back and look, at the end of the season, 1.5 sacks against Carolina in a game where they needed anybody defensively to come through. Had 4 QB hits in that game. Against Minnesota the next week, had a sack and 3 QB hits. Against Detroit, pass defensed. A couple hurries that turned into sacks a hurry that turned into a sack fumble, not by him, but by someone else. And he's still playing 60-70% of snaps. The other part of this, and I think astutely pointed out by Tom Silverstein, is in this defense, he's not going to be asked to cover. He's not going to be asked to spot drop. He's not going to be asked to cover Devontae Adams. These edge guys are going to hunt quarterbacks. That's what they're going to do. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. Now, they have to worry about what their defense is going to look like in a base 4-3 when you get stuck versus 11 personnel, or when you have whatever personnel on the field and you put a receiver in the slot and you got that outside linebacker who's going to have to be there to play passable zone defense. But he's going to get more opportunities to just do the things that he is good at. And that can potentially prolong his career. Plus, you have the rotation with Lucas Van Ness, with Rashawn Gary. And I think the Packers, with the injury to Enigbare, they could be looking at, some additional reinforcements here with their edge group. I think we're going to see opportunities for Kobe Wooden to play a little bit on the edge. Brian Gutekunst hinted at that. For Carl Brooks to play a little bit on the edge. Maybe an expanded role for Brenton Cox, who I think has some juice as a pass rusher, wide 9 off the edge, just go get after quarterbacks. Carl Brooks played defensive end in college. Kobe Wooden played defensive end in college. Are we going to see opportunities for Kenny Clark to get out there and play on the edge? Maybe. You put Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton on the inside. Let's have some fun. Let's get weird. That's the whole point of the defense. So you have Preston Smith doing more of the things that he's good at when he's still good. And he's now one of the longest tenured Packers ever to be brought in free agency. This is someone who, I don't know if he's going to make the Packers Hall of Fame. I think if the Packers win this Super Bowl, he will. Because he'll have gone to, if the Packers win this Super Bowl while he's on the team, we're talking about at least 3 NFC Championship games that he'll have played in, at least 3 13-win teams that he's played on, a free agent class that was the biggest by volume, certainly in modern Packers history, if not the most momentous in terms of the way that it turned around a franchise. Reggie White is pretty hard to beat. I think that will always be number one. It's hard to be better than bringing in the greatest defensive player to ever walk this planet. But man, that 2019 free agency class it signaled a paradigmatic shift in this organization, the philosophy of this organization. And his being a totem of that is an important part of his legacy. And the fact that when he was brought in, he was the bigger name relative to Za'Darius Smith. Za'Darius outperformed him by pure production the first 2 years. Some of the sack totals, they seemed a little flimsy. He was benefiting from a ton of one-on-one matchups, was like one of the least double-teamed pass rushers in the league off the edge. And then don't forget, just a couple years ago, he comes in, COVID year, not in great shape. And Rashawn Gary starts eating into his snaps. And by the end of the year, all of a sudden he's making plays again. And he gets his body right. He gets his mind right. Matt LaFleur, in the media saying, he wasn't in the best shape. Or it was either Matt LaFleur or Brian Gutekunst. One of the brain trusts on the record said, yeah, he wasn't in the best shape. And he comes back and he's rededicated himself. He's taken multiple pay cuts now, extensions. This is, when we talk about Packers people, we are talking about Preston Smith, a leader in the locker room, someone who does everything the right way and whose value goes beyond what he does on the field, but is still a very good player. I hate this, you got to have a veteran who's just a veteran to be a veteran. No, you have to be able to play because your voice only carries weight as a veteran if either you can still play or once upon a time you were an awesome player. And the less of a player you are now, the more awesome you had to have been It is more important that you used to be incredible if you're not very good now. Preston Smith is still really good right now. He's not at his peak. He's not at his apex, not at his physical prime. But it's his near prime. His near post prime. His post near prime? I don't know. But this is why culturally you can take a gamble on a Preston Smith. The player, the person. It's why you find ways to keep Aaron Jones, to rework that deal, which is what they're going to do. It's why, frankly, David Bakhtiari is still on the team, because I think it is not just an easy decision to say, let that guy walk. It's not. And we shouldn't act like it is, because it's not. The people side of this is crucial. It's essential. And the Packers have always operated that way. All right, back tomorrow. More from the Combine week. Brian Gutekunst said a lot, so we got to really milk this, which I love. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Facebook, Locked On Packers. Instagram, Locked On Packers. TikTok, Locked On Packers. YouTube, Locked On Packers. And of course, subscribe wherever you get podcasts so you can stay Locked On Packers.